G'day, it's Paul McWilliam here, and this is a guide to getting your fit together. And today I'm joined by Jason Cohen. Now, Jason is a fellow like me that at one stage in his life was carrying a bit too much weight, and he has undergone a real transformation. But he's also helping people go through their own transformations, and we'll talk about that as well. But he's a filmmaker, and we're really excited about a film that's going to hopefully be coming out next year that Jason's been working on for quite a while now, and just talking about what a big undertaking it is. So got a lot of things going on, but he's a guy that really I've come across through Josh LaJournée, and Josh seems to be a bit of a connector here. He's connected me with Anthony Mazziello, and I've spoken to you, and he's doing great things with the Missing Chins Run Club, isn't he, Josh? He's out and about. He's sort of a bit of a hero to us guys.
Yeah, Josh and I have known each other now for about 2.5 years, and it's funny because he lives about an hour and a half from me.
Right.
And at the time, I just thought, there's nobody down here doing, eating the way I'm eating.
Yeah.
So it was a breath of fresh air to meet him, and that's kind of, as you briefly talked about, that's kind of where the documentary started for me, was in a random email from a stranger. And so yeah, it's been great for the last 2.5 years or so, getting a chance to know him, and a lot of amazing things have developed since.
And we talk about this on the podcast a lot. It's that community, and I think people need that support, whether it's actually in person or online, or just being able to tap into, because I've been watching the little snippets of the trailers you've been putting together for the movie. Now, that before I forget about it, it's Big Change the Film is what it's called, and you can put a .com on the end of that to find the website, and I'm sure there's stuff on YouTube as well, isn't there? Clips from the film.
Yeah, we've got a trailer. We've got a couple of trailers out. So the film is around 4 different people who've all lost, I think, combined around 775 pounds.
Wow.
I think it's actually more than that now.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. Two ladies, 2 gentlemen, who've just, I could gush and go into the difference that they've made in their lives, and the impossible things that they've come over. One of those subjects is Josh LaJournée, and so we've got a trailer now with all 4 of them. You can go to bigchangethefilm.com or youtube.com/bigchangethefilm.
Right.
And see that there. Same thing on Facebook as well.
On Facebook. And so taking a step back, you're just a regular guy, doing what you're doing, and just got to a point where you thought, hey, I'm not well, I'm not healthy, I'm too overweight. And, what's your story?
Yeah. So it was kind of a perfect storm of events. I was overweight for most of my adult life. I had steadily creeped up, and found myself looking at the scale one morning and seeing 297 pounds on the scale. And my scale at the time only went to 300. And it was one of those rotary types, so you could see exactly where you were at. It was a very visual kind of experience.
Yeah.
And I just told myself, look, this isn't going any further. You're not getting above 300. Now that I look back, I was probably above 300 at some point, because I look at pictures of myself and I was definitely a bit bigger at different periods.
Different times,
But, that was just a time that I said no more. And at the same time, I had a buddy who was, about 15 or so years older than me, a little bit more, but died unexpectedly of a heart attack. He looked way better than me. And that was kind of a wake-up call. I had another buddy of mine who randomly gave me a bicycle as a going away gift. He was moving. Yeah. And I thought, what are you giving me a bike for? The last place I want to be is sitting on a bike in front of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also around that same time, a buddy challenged me to a 6-month-long weight loss challenge. And so it was kind of this perfect storm of all these events happening simultaneously, totally unplanned. And really was just, this series of events that really changed the trajectory of my life, of my health. And
you were ready for it, weren't you? It was a perfect time to be ready for it, basically, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that I had any anticipation of it because I was not focused in any way, shape, or form. It's not like I had been thinking about this previously.
Yeah,
I mean, I probably had gone months, maybe even years, not getting on the scale,
yeah,
other than basically when I would go to a doctor.
yeah,
And so in my mind, I hadn't necessarily been preparing myself, but I think probably somewhere deeper within, things had been happening, for long enough that I was ready to do something about it. Because I did, for me, I didn't have what I know for a lot of people, they have that kind of yo-yo,
yeah. I was just
really
about to ask you
intense,
that.
off,
Yeah,
on. I never had that. I mean, really, I made a decision once to lose weight, and I'm about 7 or 8 years into it now,
well, that's
and
fantastic. That you're an
I,
outlier because most of us have that yo-yo effect. It's a constant battle over a number of years.
yeah, my wife would probably say I'm stubborn or hard-headed. I would say determined. But once I put my mind to something, it's kind of just it's a focus for me for a long time until it's done.
Yeah,
And that was kind of that's been my journey. I'm still not done. Every day is still a opportunity to make good or bad decisions, and I'm making a lot better ones than I was a couple of years
a
ago.
couple of years ago. Well,
Uh,
that's that quote, that I saw on the Big Change, the film website, where you talk about lasting change comes from making a choice to put yourself and your health first. Every day you have to make a decision to choose the life that you want, and you are the only one that can make that decision for yourself. I think some of us look too much externally. What's the new fad, or what's who can help me do this? But you got to help yourself, don't you? That's the bottom line. You just got to help yourself.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point, I had probably having the internal dialogue, with myself for long enough, and I basically just had to get to a point where I said, I'm responsible for this. I did this, and I'm the only one who's responsible for undoing it.
Yeah.
And it
Take ownership.
really, yeah, just taking ownership of my own situation because, I had probably lived for, I not probably, I had lived for a long time under the guise of I was dealt a bad,
Yeah.
deck of cards as far as metabolism, or,
Yeah.
there were just skinny people and there are fat people. And I'm one of those people. But, you hit the rewind button a little bit and you look at me when I was 7 years old and playing, baseball or t-ball. I was a rail. I mean, I
Yeah.
was as thin as a bean. And so obviously things had changed. And, you know, when you look around you, some people are big, some people aren't. Neither one of my parents are particularly big people.
Yeah.
My wife wasn't. It's a very easy excuse or whatever you want to call it, just to say, well, they have better metabolism
Yeah.
cards than me.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to wake up and smell the coffee.
Yeah, yeah, you can't, and you tell you that self that story. It's all your genetics. You can't find, you just can't change that. But as you know, and from the subjects from the film and many other people, some of these people have lost, virtually 50% of their body weight. There's massive, massive changes that they've been able to do, and it's not been around. And we'll talk about diet in a minute, but not been around sort of depriving themselves or killing themselves in the gym. It's just been changing, some key things in their lives, isn't it? You don't have to be the biggest loser and just work and work and work and starve yourself, when you're talking about plant-based nutrition. And obviously Anthony was talking about, he didn't exercise at all initially. He just changed his diet and lost all this weight, which is amazing. So you transformed yourself and your diet through plant-based eating. How did you come to that? There's from getting a bike and someone passing away, how did you make that connection, with your diet as well?
Well, I was a horrible eater, and not just in terms of what I was eating, but lack of variety. I mean, I would basically, I commonly refer to it as I would eat anything beige. So it was bread, it was pizza, it was mac and cheese, it was
Yeah,
deli meats, it was cheese, and it was there was no variety in what I was eating.
yeah,
My idea of a vegetable was iceberg lettuce and maybe a French fry, or maybe like on a good day, canned corn. But
Wow.
again, nothing, I didn't eat vegetables.
No.
I really didn't eat fruits either. So when I decided, so 297 is my biggest. I got a bike. I started thinking about these things. I kind of made this resolve within myself. I started the weight loss challenge at 287.
Right.
And, so I lost 10 pounds. It was 6 months long. Well, at least in that point in time, I was willing to talk to anybody for any amount of time about anything related to weight loss. So
Yeah.
I would literally be in the grocery store and I would see somebody pick up something healthy and I would tell them about what I was doing. Because that was my idea. If I put it out there, then people would get interested, or they would just keep me accountable. They would ask me how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so I would ask anybody and everybody, either in my life or if it even was a stranger, if they had ever lost weight, what they had done. Because I had never tried it before. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to even try.
Yeah. Okay.
And, I had been such a picky eater. I ate so few things. I realized through the process of talking to people and whatnot that I had to start to at least be willing to give things a try.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to love it, but I could at least give, a cucumber a try, or a carrot a try, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it just took a little while of me kind of having those conversations, trying those new foods one at a time. And eventually it led me down to a path where I was actually, just for the sake, I would try anything for a week, a month, 2 months, to lose a couple pounds.
Yeah.
And so I had tried going vegetarian, kind of, large in part just with the idea of trying to lose some weight.
Just to lose some weight.
And then I was kind of toying with the idea of cutting out the dairy. I think I was doing a little bit of fish as well. And around that same time, like a lot of people, saw Forks Over Knives.
Right. Yeah.
And it kind of sealed the deal. Like, okay, I got to give this a try.
Yeah.
And I felt so much better. It really, in a lot of ways, seemed like it was going to be such a small transition away from dairy and away from fish, but I didn't realize how much of an improvement it would make in the way that I felt day to day.
Yeah.
At that time I was riding my bike a lot. I was doing a lot of group rides, and I had physical activity, if you want to call it exercise, began to consume a much larger part of my life. And it was, within a couple probably days or weeks that I really started to feel the effects of, oh wow, I'm not as tired the day after a really hard ride.
Yeah.
I'm feeling better. I have more energy all of the time, not just at certain times, but all the time I have energy. I also had kind of a adult life, just all of my adult life. I had issues with my sinuses, with getting sinus infections several times a year. I was always blowing my nose. I would always make this weird noise with my nose because I always had mucus buildup.
Yeah.
And after a short period of time, it went away. And it was something that kind of, for lack of a better term, affected me or plagued me for most of my adult life, but I just become used to. And then all of a sudden when it became absent, it was like, wow, like I'm actually feeling the effects of this way more than I ever expected. And so that was really just the beginning. And I'll say this, when I went whole food, plant-based, I still was picky. There was still a ton of foods that I didn't eat. It's probably, even in the last 6 months or a year, there are still slowly these foods that are on my no list that will come over. And my no list is pretty short right now.
Yeah.
But compared to before, it's minuscule.
How did you go the first time you tried Brussels sprouts?
The first time I had Brussels sprouts, I didn't love them. And they had been done in a pressure cooker and they were just mushy. And then I had Brussels sprouts, ironically enough, on a job, and they were kind of like crispy. I'm sure at that point they were probably fried.
Yeah.
But I just, I had a Brussels sprout in a situation where, no, I think they were done in the oven actually. I had it done in the situation where it was like, oh wow, this is really good. Like this has great flavor and whatnot. So then I immediately went home and told my wife, we have to try making these Brussels sprouts in the same way. And she was a little skeptical. And then, I love Brussels sprouts now. Like they're, like give me a pan of Brussels sprouts and I'm good for dinner.
Away you go. And I think as kids, and certainly I'm 51 and growing up, here in Australia, most of the veggies you got were boiled until they couldn't be boiled anymore. So, we weren't big fans of vegetables. as kids, like didn't mind fruit. I grew up on a fruit block. We had oranges and mandarins and grapes, but veggies were, it was a hard sell, the vegetables.
Yeah, and I grew up an only child. I know for a lot of people, if you
Yeah,
grow up in
me
a
too.
household of four siblings or so, it's like everybody is eating what everybody's going to eat, and there's
Yeah,
no variety. But because I was an only child, it wasn't like I was pretty much able to have served to me what I liked,
yeah,
and then kind of avoided what I didn't, just because of the fact that there was nobody else to please
yeah,
as far as meals go.
yeah,
And so it was never ingrained in me that, like, you know, eat your vegetables, which is kind of funny because both of my parents eat plenty of vegetables.
yeah.
I just didn't,
You just,
seem to take on that. And then, of course, when you get to college and now you're in charge of making all your own meals, it was like, okay, every day is a hamburger or
that's right.
pizza or Chinese takeout
Yeah,
or mac and cheese. It was like,
yeah,
my wife and I got married really early, and we had a meal that we jokingly called the Bachelor Special, which we ate a lot of times, which was a 99-cent frozen pizza, and then we would splurge and get like the $3, like creamy mac and cheese, and we'd split both of those things, and that was dinner,
that was your
and
dinner.
that was a lot of nights. So
Yeah,
as I worked at my age, I became even more restrictive or limited in terms of the things that I ate, and everything that I ate was terrible.
yeah. And it's very easy to be caught into that trap, isn't it? Because we're all busy, we're all working, family life, all this. So you go back to that comfort stuff, or that stuff that you just is easy to throw together, or it's easy to call in at the chicken shop on the way home and get a chicken and a big bag of chips, and some coleslaw. There's got to be a little bit of work go into it, doesn't it, to make a change? It's not just going to happen. You got to do some
Yeah,
planning.
for my wife and I, we were 20 or 21 when we got married. We were young. We didn't have much money. We didn't have much time because we were both in college.
Yeah,
She was working a job. I was starting my business. And, there is, it makes sense that there are so many fast food places because people are so busy. And,
yeah,
when when it's making a decision on, do I work today, or do I see my wife for a little bit longer, or do I learn about nutrition and make this elaborate meal?
yeah,
Like, the choice is pretty easy.
yeah,
And then that, at a certain point, bad habits die hard. So it's not like once we started making more money or having more time, we started eating better. It was like, oh, now I can stop for ice cream 3 or 4 days a week.
just more of
And
it.
yeah, and then instead of it being cheap, super calorie rich, nutrient deficient food, it was expensive, calorie rich, nutrient deficient. So we only moved up on the price scale, not on the nutrient scale.
It was just a slightly better class of crap that you're eating.
Oh, it was a lot better class, a lot better.
So the whole food plant based. I've changed my diet to pretty much 95% plant based, but I think I'm caught in that bit of a trap where I'm still eating probably some vegan junk food too. More some of that processed stuff. And what is the whole food for someone like me who's still just learning about this stuff, and someone that doesn't know anything about it? How would you describe whole food plant-based? How would you describe that diet?
Yeah, I mean, I would say fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, seeds, as close to their whole form as possible.
Right.
So foods that are recognizable, foods that are, grow from the ground or can be picked off of a tree, and that whenever you see it, at least before it's cooked, that it's actually a recognizable food.
Yes.
Now, with that being said, like, just to be completely transparent, there are some things that I probably eat that, in the strictest form of the word, like I do some, I hate to use the word protein bars, but like, when I'm training, for example,
Yeah.
I had a big race this summer. I while I was on my race, I ate plenty of bars. In training, I ate plenty of bars. When I'm traveling, sometimes, I'll go to a bar that, because I'd rather eat that than chance eating something at an airport
Yeah.
that they say doesn't have a bunch of oil, or they say doesn't have any butter or anything, and then I'm paying for it during a flight, or
Yeah. Yeah.
when I'm on the road or whatever. And so there are definitely times, I would say, I don't really eat anything that I would consider junk food. But there definitely are some foods that when you say whole food, plant-based, and you look at a chia bar, it's plant-based. It's not 100% whole food. And so I give a little room for that. And I don't personally take issue with that. Especially for me, within the last couple of years, movement, athletics, whether it's a bike or running, have kind of taken on a different form for me. And I've just had to, figure out how that gets adjusted. With that being said, we do eat, when I'm on the bike or I'm running, I do, date rolls, and things like that. But, there are just times whenever I am eating something that, it doesn't look like a carrot or a oat or whatever.
Yeah. So you're not just sitting down to plates of raw carrot, raw celery, cut up apple. That you're still cooking some stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I mean we do. There are probably some things that we do raw. It's probably more by accident than because I don't necessarily try and stick to eating a certain amount of raw meals a week or a day or a month or whatever.
Yeah.
Pretty much most of our food's cooked. It's all super delicious. It's all way better than I'm having better food than I ever had eating all the high calorie stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, and just the stuff, the research I've done, there's some amazing stuff. And that's one thing I've got to watch too. Still really nice to eat. So you can still, if you're an overeater, whether it's plant-based or, meat pies,
yeah,
you can still overeat,
yeah.
So you can't, it's not free range. I guess there's a little bit more flexibility there, but you just can't go crazy and sit down to a bucket of chili.
Yeah, you can go crazy as long as it's spinach, but a lot of the other things you do have to be a little, and look, there's probably I know for myself and for a lot of people, there's this almost like scarcity mindset, or this, compulsive eating mindset, whether it's, because you're afraid it's not going to be there, or it's because, it brings you comfort or whatever that food did for you, or you did to food that got you in the place that you were. For me, at my weight. And so it's things that I have to be careful and mindful of. Am I eating because I'm hungry? Am I eating because I'm bored?
Yeah.
Am I eating the amount that I need to eat to get me through the day, through the next day, through, movement, exercise, whatever? Or am I eating just because it's a fun, sport of sorts?
Yeah. Well, and look, for me, it was a big thing about, I'm a real estate agent. I work weekends as well. And you get home on a weekend, have something to drink, a glass of wine, some cheese. And before you know it, you've had dinner, and then you're sitting down watching TV and you're on your third or fourth glass of wine, but you're eating, big bag of salted nuts or some salt vinegar chips, or, and then some ice cream. Before you know it, I've probably eaten 4,000 calories in a 2-hour stretch.
Yeah.
And no exercise on top of that. It's not good for you, is it?
Yeah. And that stuff, it's like you do that, heck, if you only do it 20 days a year, which for me before that would have been a good year, if you do it more like, 200 days a year plus, that stuff adds up, and
you're making it hard for yourself, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah. you're kind of betting against yourself in a way.
Yeah. So you've undergone obviously a physical transformation, which is fantastic. And, we talk about that on the podcast too. It's part of it's, the getting your fitness back, getting your fit together, but massive part of that is just becoming a healthier person. And you touched on, your nasal issues, and that obviously was from the dairy products and things that you're eating. But with your health, what have you found with the people doing in the film? Obviously there's been some massive outcomes there for those people, and big change to the film. Can you touch on what you've encountered there with those people?
I think, with the kind of, I've been fortunate. I've met and interviewed um, over 100 people now.
Wow.
Through this kind of whole process.
Yeah.
And what I was really looking for with the four that, we kind of ended up deciding these are the people to tell their story,
Yeah.
is, just some diversity. I wanted two women. I wanted two guys. I wanted, somebody with, maybe younger children. Josh doesn't have any children. Tim has some older children.
Yeah.
Denise doesn't have any children either. So just wanted a diverse group of people. But I think one of the things, it's hard to say what they all have exactly in common, because there is such a,
Yeah.
the information and what they've all done is so deep and also so wide, but and also so varied. But I think, they all got to a point where they just decided to do a little something,
Yeah.
make a little bit of a change to, for Tim, it was, he didn't, one thing that a lot of people love about Tim, and that's Tim Kaufman, his story is, he didn't just say overnight, cold turkey, I'm not eating this anymore. He said, I'm just going to add a banana to my 2 or 3 breakfast sandwiches, so
Yeah.
it's like this small little thing. Josh started just doing research and learning, and,
Yeah.
he was also, I think in some ways doing it for his family's sake, which has really become a reality. And just started educating himself and just trying things. Denise decided that she would try yoga, even though she was probably over 400 pounds at that point.
Wow.
Melita just realized that it was something that she had to do for her family, because she in a lot of ways provides a lot for her family with having 3 kids who are visually impaired, who are blind.
Wow.
Her husband's visually impaired; he's blind as well, and then having 2 kids with special needs beyond that. And so I think everybody just started to kind of say, like, I got to put myself first. I've got to make whatever small changes necessary to consider myself before. To realize that I have to put myself so that I can
Yeah.
serve and I can love those around me.
Yeah. It's just a form. It's a form of selfishness that is a good form of selfishness, isn't it? That you need to. It's like putting the mask on yourself on the plane before you put it on the child. You need to make sure that you're operating at your optimum, or as close to it as possible. Otherwise, everyone else around you is going to be miserable. It's not going to be an easy time if you're down in the dumps or just can't function as a person. I know myself. There's just so many things I couldn't do with my kids because I just let myself get too heavy. I wasn't physically able to do it, and that wears on you, and you become rather than I grew up as a happy, positive kid, and that slowly grinds away on you. So you've got to think of yourself, I think, and it's not always easy to do, but I think that's just probably the key, isn't it? You've got to just make those small changes for yourself, and then other people will benefit from it down the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, if we put so much focus into our finances or into, our career development or any of those kinds of things, and then, which, was in a lot of ways where I was, and then you forget that, like the only lasting thing, or, and that is kind of, not to say irrevocable, but, you can't get to 78 and expect to change everything in 2
No.
weeks, or
No.
although I have met people who've done incredible things later in life, but like these are things that as you're considering your personal development, your professional development, your love life, all those things, like it deserves every bit as much investment
Yeah.
as all those other things. Like your health, if you have all the money in the world, but then you end up dying from type 2 diabetes, and you have to go through what that looks like later in life.
Yeah.
Like there's no amount of money in the world that I would trade for having to go through that experience. Same thing with heart disease, and really the same thing with being overweight. Now knowing what I know now, if I would have gone later in life, I probably would have had some of those issues. And
Yeah.
even if I wouldn't have had any health issues, the issues that I was already having, just moving around, feeling uncomfortable in my own skin, being insecure, all those kinds of things. If you just take those and drag those out for another, 40, 50, 30, 60 years, it would not have been a fun time.
No, no. And it's, as you've proven, and as the people in the movie, and also on your Facebook page, correct me if I'm wrong, but you show interviews with other people that you've met along the way. It's not just these key four people. Is that right?
Yes, I've done about 105 or 106 interviews, and the total pounds lost between everybody is right around 13,000 pounds.
Wow. And is that big change the film on Facebook? Is that where they find that?
You can go there. If you go to Big Change the Film on YouTube or Big Change the Film on Facebook,
yeah,
and then also through a normal podcasting service like Stitcher, iTunes.
Okay.
You can also look up Big Change the Film podcast. And that's kind of, because basically I made the decision with these four to kind of dive deep and we spent about a week or more with everybody, flown out to them, basically live their life to try and get a sense for their story. But I also realized in that process that I met all these other incredible people who had all done incredible things. And so I knew that I had to figure out a way to get their stories out there, because I think in a lot of ways, it's really easy to believe the narrative of so many people have not been able to lose weight successfully. Yeah. And so, if I've tried it, if I've done the yo-yo thing, 50, 100 times, 10 times, look at everybody else who's failed. It's really easy to, where there's been something proven, it's easy to say, well, that's works, whether it's success or failure. And so it's really easy to point to failure. Whereas my thought is, if I can put these people's stories in front of people and I can point to success, then hopefully in a way I can change people's perception of what they're capable of.
Well, it's such a powerful thing, and it's a really, and you and Josh and Anthony, and there's numerous other people getting the message out there as well. But it's a sort of still at that sort of grassroots sort of level, but it is super powerful. And people like me that have just tried to get into this change and really completely change my diet, and having those resources out there are so valuable. And it's amazing just seeing where people come from, and it's a constant journey, and it's never ending journey. And I think you touched on that earlier, that it's just wonderful to be able to see that, okay, if that person, geez, they were heavier than me or older than me or whatever, surely I can do it too. I think that's such a powerful thing. And I thank you for doing that, because it certainly helped me. And I know it's helped, hundreds of other people too around the world, thousands probably that have looked at it. So the Big Change, the film, ideally you think that's going to be out next year sometime. And if you're probably, as you're saying, you've interviewed so many people and it's, if everyone was able to make a movie, they'd all be doing it. There's a bit of work that goes into it too, I guess, that on top of what you're doing as a day job. You still think you'll be able to keep to that timeline of early next year?
That's certainly the hope. Like I said, we kind of have a couple, we may have talked about it before you hit record, but, we kind of have a couple things that are happening around that time that would make sense for it to happen. So I've kind of put that date in my mind to work towards. And I've got some things in place, some help. I've got kind of a junior editor of sorts that I've kind of hired that's been helping me with some things. Yeah. And then the person who's been behind the camera for much of it, his name's Jamie Aurelian. He and I are trying to kind of figure out how to divvy up some of the tasks to stick with that date. I did not realize at the beginning of this that, most documentaries take years, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, plus years. So we're probably 2.5 years into it right now. And I would love to see it be able to be wrapped up within 4. Wow. Which has also been cool because, with Josh, when we first filmed him, he was in a very different place. One of the reasons why Josh, kind of spoke to me and I really felt like I needed to reach out to him was because no one had told his story, really in any kind of a video or visual format. It had only been told via audio.
Yeah.
So, and then, so much has changed for him in his life since then, as far as his physical accomplishments, where he's been,
Absolutely.
Tim, with Tim and Heather, uh, I think I can say this because the pictures speak volumes, but, Heather looks like a completely different person when we first filmed them. And then I was actually in Boston last weekend for a job, but I had a chance to get together with Nalita. And since we were there last year, her husband is really, even more so than before, decided to really take on his health, not just go along with her. And
Fantastic.
he's lost 100 pounds since we were there
Wow.
last, which he had already lost like 200 pounds. And
Wow.
he
Really?
placed third place in his category this weekend. I got a chance to see him at a race in Boston, and so it's been incredible, and Denise as
Yeah.
well, just to see the progression of these people. So in some ways, the impatience in me is like, I want this to be done, but in some ways it's been great to kind of see their stories unfold,
Yeah.
beyond what I thought was, already incredible.
Yeah, it just adds that greater depth, doesn't it? Greater depth, and it's that through line. So, just and I know getting on a little bit with time, but just from your own point of view, Jason, you mentioned that you came to a point where you wanted to lose weight. Few things came, that perfect storm sort of came together. You got on the bike. You're doing running. So, what are you actually doing now in terms of your physical stuff? Because I know, as I said earlier, Anthony was one of these lucky people. He just changed what he ate and he just dropped all his weight. But some of us still have to do a bit of exercise, in my opinion, but we'll see what happens. But
Yeah,
what do you,
something that I've learned. I actually learned it on a multi-day bike tour. And I was, like I said before, I was always in a place where I'd do anything to lose a little bit of weight.
yeah,
And I love the bike. It's my first love. Um, and the we ate terrible on the bike tour. It was 6 days cycling, 8-10 hours a day. We ate terrible, and I didn't lose a single pound.
wow,
And I'm thinking, I'm burning calories literally for 8 hours to 10 hours a day.
yeah,
If there's any time in which I should, and 6 days in a row, if there's any time in which I should lose a couple pounds, it should be this.
this is it. Yeah,
But I ate terrible the entire time.
yeah,
Because I thought I could get away with it, and I thought I would still, beat the scale.
yeah. Were you
And so if there's anything,
plant-based at that point? Was that still plant-based?
I think I was probably doing vegetarian around then. I think I
Right,
was eating a bit of cheese, so a
right.
lot of cheese. And we were
Okay.
we were we were passing through Texas, and so like it was basically Mexican every meal, or every other
Cheese
meal,
everywhere.
just with a ton
Yeah,
of cheese.
yeah,
Um, but so if there's anything I've learned over the last 7 years, is that exercise, physical activity, movement definitely plays a part in it. Um, you know, does it play 10%? Maybe. Does it play 5%? Maybe. Does it play a little more? It's possible. But from what I've seen, even when I am in a situation where I'm just training nonstop, or I'm running or biking nonstop, um, at least for me and my body, I don't just lose a crazy amount of weight whenever my physical activity goes up. I
yeah.
lose weight whenever I'm really focusing on my input.
What you're putting
Um,
in. Yeah.
and I
And
think I've
that's something
also,
that, sorry, that's something that, talk to a regular person. How do you lose weight? Got to go to the gym. That's, I think exercise pops into their head first, more so than the diet side of it. I might be wrong, but that just seems to me that everyone has to go and join the gym or buy the latest gadget to try and lose weight. But what you're saying is
yeah,
it's what you're putting in your mouth, isn't it?
yeah. I mean, the reality is, I mean, if you look at the numbers and how much exercise you have to burn to work off one single bad choice, whether it's a meal or a splurge dessert or whatever, it's really quite tremendous.
Yeah.
The amount that you have to run for a single Snickers, or that you have to,
Oh dear.
bike for a Sunday, or whatever. Like, the numbers just don't work well in your favor, as far as,
Yeah.
if you, and so, I've begun to look at my meals and my days as investments, in the same way that if you want to, you want to retire early, or you want to have more money in your bank account, or whatever that financial goal is, you have to make good decisions daily to get to that end goal.
Yeah.
And at the end of that goal, or at the end of that time period, you'll deal with the ramifications of your daily decisions.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. It's the same way that I kind of see diet now. I'll see my meals, and it's a reason why it doesn't bother me to sit amongst people who are eating something that I used to love, or I don't necessarily miss things, because I realize that every single time I put food in my mouth, every meal that I eat is an investment in
Yeah.
my health and my weight and whatnot. And so these days I'm still riding my bike a bunch. I had a big race in August that was my first kind of ultra endurance marathon. And
So what did you do? What was the distances?
It was just one distance. It was the Leadville 100
Wow.
trail
Okay.
race. So it kind of had hit my radar a couple years ago, and I actually accidentally 3 years ago ran the heavy half with Marathon with Josh. On
Accident?
about
How do you do that by accident?
I was in Leadville 3 days before the race,
Oh
and
no, you
and
got
then
roped into it.
yeah. Well, no, more like I roped my wife into it. And then Josh kind of last minute decided to come up and do it with me. And now that's become a yearly event. The second year, 2 years ago, we had about 15 or 20 guys and gals who came and did it. And then this year we had probably closer to 40 people who did it. In Leadville, that first year just taught me, I kind of, in the running down 6th Street to the finish line, I almost saw my kind of journey flash before my eyes, just realizing that, 5 years or 4 years ago at that point, I would have never, imagined that
Yeah.
I could be, doing this. And that's been the same thing
Yeah.
for, seeing now all these people who have come, through the Missing Chins or otherwise, that are all kind of have come from similar situations, that have lost, hundreds of pounds, that it's all a bunch of people who, we didn't necessarily think we'd ever be there, but obviously we've been extremely fortunate to kind of turn that upside down. And,
That's
and yeah,
fantastic. That the Missing
it's
Chins, and
amazing.
I'm luckily enough, I'm a member of the Missing Chins Running Club. But I think something like that as part of a community is so valuable. And someone just when I was 360 pounds, if I looked at somebody like Josh, and who was over 400 running his races, I would still say I can't do that. But I'm sure Josh didn't set out to do that right at the start. His goal was just to start get moving, and then a month later move a little bit more, or what people I think always jump to the finish line rather than think about the little steps along the way. And I think that if anyone's listening to the podcast and say, oh yeah, well I could never do the Leadville, or I could never do a 5K, that shouldn't be probably your goal straight off. It just bring it back a little bit, little bite size. And then in a year's time or 2 years' time, as you've shown with the people that you've interviewed, amazing things can happen. It's incredible. And a year or 2 years goes like that. It's amazing what can be achieved.
Yeah, and I think we all have within ourselves so much more than we give ourselves credit for. And I think that a big factor for me for a really long time was I just didn't believe in myself, and I
Yeah.
didn't believe in my ability to lose the weight. I didn't believe in my ability to, as awkward as it still is to me to call myself one. I never thought of myself as an athlete.
Yeah.
I still struggle to think of myself as an athlete.
But you've just run
And
100 miles.
yeah, I know, but there's still that lingering doubt or self-doubt. And I think, once you start to believe in yourself, whether it is just believing in yourself to make better eating decisions,
Yeah.
or to choose to move a couple minutes a day. Cause I think one of the things that is kind of linked in with exercise and food is, once you eat better, once you do better, then you have more energy, and then you want to do things.
Yeah.
So there's kind of natural, connection between the two that may seem like, oh, I'm losing weight because I'm exercising. Well, no, maybe I'm losing weight because I'm eating better, and then I then have the energy and the drive to exercise, and it's
To
all kind of
exercise.
happening together. Yeah.
Yeah. It's momentum, isn't it? It's all about momentum. And, it's like that snowball effect. You've just got to start small, and then you'll build that momentum. And as you say, it's making those decisions on a daily basis of, do I put the right things in my mouth? Do I deposit into my health bank? really, rather than taking out of it all the time by eating burgers or whatever. Before you go, Jason, big change, the film, so people check that out. But just talk to me a little bit about the Healthy Human Revolution, because I spoke to Anthony the other day, and he's involved in that with you. But I've checked out the website, and my wife's been really supportive, but she said, "Oh, look, I'll do the vegetables." But anytime meat turns up anywhere, it seems to end up on her plate. So we're gonna try the 7-day plan from the website. So it'd be really good to see how that goes. But can you talk a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yeah, I throughout the years I've met a multitude of incredible people with great stories. Anthony happened to be one of those, and we kind of made a connection and became fast friends. And then Dr. Lori Marbus, kind of throughout the whole process, just again, kind of, was a kindred spirit.
Yeah.
And so we had kind of been talking for, I guess over a year now, about the possibility of doing something together. And, for me personally, I'm doing the film, I'm doing the podcast series, but I kind of felt like I didn't have a place to hand people off to, a
Right.
place where, if people get to the end of an interview, or they get to the end of the film eventually, or even the end of a trailer now, and they say, okay, well, I want to do what that person did, but I don't have the experience, or I need some more information. I need some more education.
Where do I go? What's next?
Yeah. And so, I had always kind of struggled with that. And then, as I had communicated that to them, and we kind of thought about what we could possibly do together, that kind of started to take shape into this, basically online education and community aspect, that we would have, where people could come, they could get, educational resources, they could become a part of a community in which they could have access to a doctor has experience, doing practicing plant-based medicine.
Yeah.
She is, she can't give direct medical advice, but she can certainly speak to a multitude of different issues that people might be going through, what she's seen in her previous clients. She's got medical licenses, I think, in 13 different states.
Wow.
And then, Anthony with his whole journey, as well as, now he's a health coach, and he's got a ton of experience, just in the corporate realm, and just understanding how people work, understanding, how systems work.
Yeah.
And also just having a huge passion for the, the mental and the mindset side of things.
Yeah.
And then me being able to, take what I've learned from interviewing all these people, also having the ability to actually create original content that hopefully kind of stands out. Just bringing something to people that hopefully can take them and hold their hand, or just give them some resources they might need just to make that next step. And so the three of us have kind of come together to create something that hopefully will provide people that opportunity to get the things that they need, whether it's, whether they're kind of in the middle of it and they're just trying to, kind of push the pedal to the floor, or it's somebody who's on day one who's like, we don't know what a plant-based diet is. Yeah. Where do I go from here?
Well, it is so confusing when you decide to make the change, because there is lots of information, but it's all over the place. So it's really good to have, and a Rich Rolls site's pretty good for that sort of stuff, meal plans and those sorts of things. But it's, the more, if you can have more places where people can go and they can feel safe, and they're not being, because there's a lot of people that are trying to sell you something, and so I'm not sure if their heart's in the right spot, so, but people like you guys that have been through the process yourself, you're not a conglomeration at the back end trying to cash in on this. I think it's fantastic, and going back to what you did, and we talk about it on the podcast all the time, tap into your community, tap into the people around you. And I love what you say, you would go up to people in the supermarket, or, that you saw that, and you'd ask them questions, because you learn a lot. There's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of knowledge in your school or in your sporting club. There's lots of people out there, and they want to help you. They want to make sure, if they're doing something well, they want to share that information. And I guess what you guys are doing is an extension of that, just wanting to share what you've learned.
Yeah. And the whole film, I mean, really a lot of what the reason we're talking in the first place, a lot of these things that happen for me, at least as a result of sending that first email out to Josh saying, hey, this is something I want to do.
Yeah.
And really that came from a place of, I realized that I had only gotten to where I was because of the kindness, the support, and the help of other people. And part of my responsibility in that was to kind of, for lack of a better term, pay it forward and begin to invest in other people's lives. And that's why I'm here today. I'm in such a different place than I was 7 years ago, or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I have so much, as Tim Kaufman would say, I have so much gratitude for that.
Yeah.
And so I can't help but try and figure out, I know the life that I was living. I knew the lack of, energy and the lack of joy that was in my life.
Yeah.
And so, when I see somebody at the supermarket who is struggling to get through, or there are some of those tells that, that I know, whenever you see people who are constantly picking at their shirt because it's, too close to them. Those are the things that I don't want for other people, because I know what it's like to be kind of on the other side of it. Like I said, I'm a work in progress, but I can still recognize some of those things that I've either been able to overcome or I've come so far on that I want that for other people as well. It's not, you don't have to suffer. You don't have to, feel uncomfortable in your own skin. You don't have to be sick. You don't have to struggle. And I want what I've been able to experience for other people and for them to have that opportunity as well.
Yeah. And I've found exactly the same, and I'm right at the start, but the reason I've done the podcast and put myself out there is for accountability, so people, I've said, hey, I want to do this. I want to lose weight. And this is my way of being accountable because I don't want to make a fool of myself. But it's also to get all this great information from people like you, because I grew up in team sports, and that's how I function well as part of a team. I don't think I would have been a terrible tennis player, but I feel as though we're all on the same team and we can all help each other. And, so I really appreciate your time today, Jason, and what you're doing is fantastic. So where can people find you if they want to check into all this sort of stuff? Where's the best place for them to find you?
So probably the best place right now, just because I'm starting to direct. So the new podcast with interviews for, with people who've lost weight will actually be transitioning to Healthy Human Revolution.
Yep.
So healthyhumanrevolution.com is probably one of the best places.
Yep.
On Instagram, personally, I'm under Jason_Cohen.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I'm also on Facebook. I'm not super active on Facebook, but those are kind of some of the best ways. We also have a Healthy Human Revolution Facebook group.
Yep.
And then bigchangeofthefilm.com, Big Change of the Film on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Yeah. And YouTube, I guess if they put in just Big Change the Film on YouTube, they'll find all the clips.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just youtube.com/Big Change the Film.
Right. Okay. Brilliant. Oh, brilliant. That's great, mate. So you're putting out some really, and again, I talk about this all the time. It's amazing when you associate with positive people, what change that makes. You can put all the diet and the exercise and all that to one side, but just talking to people that are doing something positive with their life, it really helps you. It's a real benefit to yourself. And I keep saying to people, tap into that, because it just might be the little spark that you need to make that massive change. So again, thanks for putting that positivity out there, mate. And I really appreciate it. And thanks for your time.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for doing what you're doing. I look forward to talking to you again, and I won't recognize you a couple of months or a couple of years down the road.
And I'm rocking my veggie powered shirt.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I'll look forward to hearing from you when you're doing your first 5K or half marathon or 100 miler.
Well, I'm jumping on the bike myself, because I need, one of the big reasons is I need both my knees replaced from years of playing football. So I would love to do 5Ks. I'm still a little bit doubtful whether that's going to happen, Jason, but I might do some crazy mountain bike race. So I love my mountain.
Well, look, if we just look over a little bit, you might see the bike obsession.
Yeah, I love it.
So I get it. Yeah, the bike's a wonderful place to be. For me, also another thing, I don't know what it's like out there for you, but but trail running has really been good to me in terms of being a lot easier on the body. I still love the road,
Yeah.
and where I live, the road's really the only option.
Right.
But you know, trail running whenever I'm able to is really just an incredible opportunity. And the other thing that I've learned through trail running, and it's begun to creep into the road, is, you know, just because you're going for a run doesn't mean you have to be running the entire time without stopping. You know, you walk a
Right.
little bit, and that's one
Yeah.
of the wonderful things about doing trail running is, you know, there's kind of the expectation that at some point you will be stopping.
Yeah. I've watched some of those Netflix documentaries about some of these amazing trail runners and the extremes they go through. And yeah, they're not running all the time, are they? They're like mountain goats, some of them up and down and around. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a trail running has, you know, and hiking, you know, it starts out with hiking and then you start moving a little faster, basically,
Yeah.
at times. And you know, it gives you an incredible way to see the world and
Yeah.
see things that, you know, you might otherwise not see. And so, you know, I'd encourage you to give that a check out as well. If running on the road is a little rough for you, you know,
Yeah.
feeling that dirt underneath your legs oftentimes can be a huge relief.
Can help you. All right, mate. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. And look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Paul.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.